Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalist Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including the state budget disagreement between House and Senate Republicans. That story and more coming up on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Steve Goldstein filling in for Ted Simons. It's Friday and that means it's time for the Journalist Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Howie Fisher of Capital Media Services, Wayne Schutsky of KJZZ, and Jeremy Duda from Axios Phoenix. We should mention that Jeremy's wife is an employee of Arizona PBS. All right, Howie, we teased it. House and Senate Republicans are not agreeing on the budget. As we sit here Friday afternoon, any progress made on the House side? Governor Hobbs has already called it DOA.
Well, define progress. Republicans this afternoon were doing the preliminary approval of the budget. The Democrats, most of them didn't even bother showing up in the chambers. They said, A, you haven't cared to engage us, and B, we don't think this is a final budget anyway, so why should we participate in this? So yes, they're going to put out something. They probably won't have the final votes till Monday. There seem to be some GOP lawmakers who decided this is a good time for vacation. And so they'll put out their bill Monday. We're supposed to see the Senate version of the bill Monday. Now, the Senate version is being billed as the one with not only the Senate Republicans, Senate minority Democrats, and the governor. Now, they'll put out theirs. At some point, somebody's going to have to say, well, who gets to hear what version? Do we amend one of these versions or whatever? The key is coming up with sufficient Republican votes, because you need a sort of a majority of the majority Republicans to get clearance, and then filling in sufficient Democratic votes for the Republicans who don't like it.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, what's the biggest difference between what the Senate is negotiating with Governor Hobbs and what the House is putting out?
Well, it seems like for weeks, it seems like the biggest sticking point has been what Matt Gress has called the 90-90-90 plan, which is, you remember a couple of years ago when they were trying to get votes for the budget, they gave everyone, every lawmaker a pot of money. It's kind of the Oprah, you get $15 million and you get $15 million. So the Senate Republicans decided they wanted to do something similar, where everyone gets, I think, at least on the Republican side, gets a little over $5 million. And they said, we'll give the same amount to the governor's office, we'll give the same amount to the House. The House has not been very receptive to that. They want bigger ticket projects. They don't like the per person allocation the way they did a couple of years ago. It does not seem like that like a insurmountable obstacle, but it really has been a major sticking point for the last I would say a few weeks, probably longer than that. And that, I guess we won't know all the differences between the two budget plans until Monday, but that has been the thing that keeps coming up over and over again. We hear about how they've not been on the same page. They're not negotiating together with the governor. They're meeting separately with the governor's office, which is pretty bizarre. In the meantime, the Senate seems like what John Kavanaugh, the Senate Appropriations Chair, told me a couple of days ago is we're 95% of the way there with the governor. We'll be 100% by Monday, and then they'll pass that, and then I guess we'll see what the House does with it.
Yeah, so the House is just sort of getting in the way of that progress?
Yeah, I don't know if they're getting in the way of that. The Senate and the governor seem to just be moving along. Again, as Howie mentioned, once it comes Monday and we've seen both sets of bills introduced, that's where it can kind of get sticky, who's hearing what. And then ultimately, if the Senate version does move through the Senate, they are going to have to convince the House to take up that version. So that's where things are going to start coming into conflict, and we're going to have to start seeing some wheeling and dealing and negotiating.
And I think what may have to happen is they may have to take the House plan and put it up in the Senate and say, see, you don't have the votes here, and then you can tell the House Republicans, no, this isn't going to work, so let's start over. And again, it's a question of who believes what they can get through. I would foresee the Senate saying, sure, we'll give this a try. What do you think is going to happen?
One question, though, what you said about the majority of the majority, because that phrase sticks with me. In the past, we have seen certain leaders, whether it's the Speaker of the House or the House Majority Leader or the Senate President, say, no. Even if a Democratic governor likes this, if it's not the majority of the majority, it's not going to move forward. Is that Warren Peterson's tack as well?
It depends on the issue. For example, years ago we had Medicaid expansion passed, and they literally rolled the Senate president, who was
the next governor. You mean?
Yes, the next governor, Mr. Biggs. He'll be back, and it can happen. But I think there's belief, if you want to have your people loyal to you, if in fact you have 33 House Republicans, you probably need 17 of them to at least sign on to the package. And then you fill the rest of it in with Democrats, and that allows perhaps the more conservative members, the Alexander Culledons of the world, to go ahead and say, I'm not for this, but it doesn't matter. I think they all understand that. I would be hard-pressed to think you would pass a budget where you had fewer than 16 Republicans or fewer than let's say 8 Republicans in the Senate just going for it.
Yeah, I mean, the Senate President, Speaker of the House, these folks are dependent on a votes of the majority for their positions, and it makes you real unpopular real quick if you start going against the majority of your own caucus. So that makes this such a balancing act. You have to get the majority of your caucus. You still have to get a Democratic governor who presumably brings along, most Democratic lawmakers, and the House budget, just worth noting, has a lot of stuff that is, and I think we're going to get to some of that, is going to be a major non-starter with the Democratic governor, and so this is why you kind of have to have everyone negotiating together.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about getting the majority, even in this House plan, which has been pitched as more kind of fiscally conservative, you do see little projects here and there that stick out as a proposal from one lawmaker or another, and you start thinking, oh, is this meant to get this Republican House member in line and make sure they're going to vote on this? So yeah, I would imagine, as Howie said, that we're going to see a Republican majority on whatever we end up seeing.
And there's another piece that we've seen in the House plan that we've seen. There are things that the governor vetoed earlier this year, like different and more frequent re-verifications. Sorry about that, for food stamps. Yeah. So they figured, okay, now we'll put it in the package, and will you swallow hard, or are you going to say we don't want this? Obviously, there have to be some things that they want to send back to her. There are fights that people are having. Senator Mark Finchem is having a fight over family court judges that he say are going ahead and telling families you have to have psychologists. So there's a provision about, well, we're going to freeze the salary of family court judges. Now, I don't know if that makes the final version, but everybody's got something in there. Then there are little things. There are big highways. They want to widen I-10 from Citrus all the way out to State Route 85, to 3 lanes each way because they think there'll be development out there. Then you have the tiny little things. We're going to fix this intersection in Paradise Valley or this intersection up in Prescott Valley. And so there's a little pork even in that.
Which incidentally is kind of why you do some of these per person allocations. A couple of years ago, as everyone has their little projects in their district, a rodeo or a intersection or something, and that's kind of, so I guess, you do it one way or you do it the other. It's kind of, maybe there's kind of it ends up all the same in either version.
And Wayne, briefly though, let me ask you this. This is a phrase that viewers really want to know about. Is this going to be a fiscally responsible budget?
Fiscal responsibility is in the eye of the beholder.
Okay.
I would imagine everyone kind of has these federal cuts on the mind. Democrats aren't psyched about it, but I think even the governor has that on the mind, and so I don't think they're going to go out of their way to overspend like we saw a few years ago. Oh, look at this huge pot of money we had. Let's spend it down to what, $11 million left in the bank. So, fiscally responsibility, sure.
Well, but then you have, is it an emotionally responsible budget? In other words, you can say, yeah, we can balance the budget. We always do. We have to. This isn't like Congress. Right. But then again, if we are making cuts to, let's say, the Medicaid program in terms of work requirements and increased eligibility requirements and other things, is that responsible if you're kicking more people off of Medicaid? Yeah, we'll have a balanced budget. I can guarantee that. Will everyone be happy? I can guarantee you they won't.
Sure, and that goes back to things that are non-starters with the governor's office. I have a very hard time seeing Katie Hobbs signing a budget that kicks folks off of Medicaid. She's already been sounding the alarms about congressional cuts, about what's happening at the federal level. I don't think she's going to be willing to do that at the state level.
And how we close us out with this particular topic as it relates to in-state tuition. Matt Gress has brought this up as well. And also, how does this relate to how voters decide on something in 2022?
Well, this is really fascinating. As you know, in 2022, prior to that, we had a ballot measures going back over a decade saying if you're not here legally, you're not entitled to certain state benefits. And it was considered tuition was in-state tuition state benefit. 2022 voters passed Prop 308, said if you are a dreamer, which means you've been here since you were a child, you spent a certain number of years in high school here, you graduated from high school here, we're going to give you in-state tuition. There's some verbiage in the budget package, and as I say, budget, as we all know, it doesn't just mean numbers, it means policy, that says if you're not here legally, you're not entitled to benefits. Now, they're not repealing Prop 308, and they say, well, but this is a different group. Well, how is it a different group? Well, there was this case out of Texas that said Texas also had in-state tuition for Dreamers that overturned that. So it's more performance. It's more going for the red meat, saying we're doing what Mr. Trump wants to do, which is making sure that people who are not here legally don't get any benefits.
Does that go anywhere, Wayne?
Again, that's another one that I would see the governor having a hard time swallowing, and the courts also might have a hard time swallowing because, as Howie pointed out, it conflicts with a voter-approved ballot initiative.
Okay, we've got some good meat in Maricopa County yet again, except this time the supervisors are not being threatened with jail. It's just that the new county recorder, relatively new, 5-6 months, Justin Heap, has decided that his fight with them has gone too far. The responsibilities were taken away from his office, which we saw when a couple of the supervisors lost their primaries. Also, Stephen Richer lost his primary last summer. Jeremy, what is this lawsuit at its core about?
So at its core is about who has what authority over elections in Maricopa County, and very specifically over the aspects and responsibilities that were moved from the recorder's office to the Board of Supervisors back in December, as they saw, or I think it's before December, it's before the election, after the primary. They knew they were going to have a new county attorney or a new county recorder. They made some changes that Stephen Richer agreed to on his way out the door, where they transferred IT services away from the recorder to the Board of Supervisors. That was really the big one. That's the focus of the lawsuit. Justin Heap says he needs that to do some of the things that he wants to do in terms of election integrity. He campaigned on some big ideas, some big promises about what he was going to do for elections in Maricopa County. And even if that agreement had stayed in place, the previous one, he probably lacks authority to do a lot of the things he talked about. This perhaps restricts him more than he wants to. He wants more power, and this is now he's going to court trying and basically force the supervisor's hand. They've been unable to agree for months over a new agreement. Now he's trying to have a judge
And
settle.
of course, tied up in all of this is the question of, does he need permission from the Board of Supervisors and/or the county attorney to hire his own lawyer? Now, he is suing as the treasurer, which, if you look at on the surface, it would suggest, the recorder. And we look on the surface, suggests that he needs permission. However, he's got something called America First Legal, which is kind of a right-wing law firm that's defending him and bringing this case. And so if they're not charging him, does he need that permission? He actually had a different attorney, former Supreme Court Justice Gould, who's now doing a lot of work for Republicans. Now it's a whole different group. So this thing could get thrown out on technical grounds.
Yeah, and actually the county attorney sent a letter to America First Legal basically saying that, no, you did need my permission.
Okay.
I believe it said you're under the impression that you've been retained by the county, but as the recorder's attorney, you have not. Now they point to a state law that spells out county attorneys' duties that doesn't explicitly deal with this issue, but there's maybe some language in there that they could interpret that way and some appellate court sentiment. So the challenge to the challenge could be challenged. It's all getting tied up. But going back to the original issue, it's the IT services. It's other responsibilities that were removed under this agreement, because under state law, a lot of these responsibilities can be the supervisors, can be the recorder, and Heap seems to be under the impression that they took responsibilities away that are only supposed to be his, but a lot of them are ones that could go either way.
We also saw an old Board of Supervisors make changes to Adrian Fontes, what he was in charge of, but he went along with it and dealt with folks like Bill Gates, that, okay, let's actually team up on this, because another person was hired to actually do some of the recording duties, in essence.
Sure,
election duties.
Sure, and this is different county by county, and the laws are, at times a bit vague. It's not entirely clear what has to be with one, always entirely clear what has to be with one side or the other. Stephen Richer used to talk about this, and that's still an issue for him. That I think you have some counties where I think the Board of Supervisors have taken a lot more away from the recorder than
Richer wrote a
Maricopa.
column in the Republic sticking up for Heap.
because of the ambiguity of a lot of these laws, and I think Heap wants the judges, the courts to settle this. I believe the way he put it is a lot of the statutes say, the recorder or other officer in charge of elections. He wants that to be the default to the recorder, I believe, and so unless there's some kind of agreement between the recorder and the Board of Supervisors.
Which of course always leads, whoever loses said, it was an activist judge. Right. Well, the fact is, if you craft better laws, and this is hardly a model of of clarity in Title 16 in terms of the election code, then you wouldn't have these problems.
Yeah, one of the big examples is early ballot processing that had been handled by the recorder, and under this new agreement switched over back to the Board of Supervisors. Those are the people who basically open up the early ballots and make sure everything's there, everything's in order. Well, now the supervisors are the ones who oversee that function.
Yeah.
And if you look at the state law, the supervisors are allowed to control that function. In fact, I believe, as Jeremy said, it says, the Board of Supervisors or the head of this public body. So Heap's arguing that should be his because the recorder handles a lot of other early voting functions, but state law doesn't seem to agree with
Let's also understand, underneath all of this is Justin Heap has been one of those people who is part of the conspiracy theories. And he's convinced that somehow the Board of Supervisors, those four out of five being Republicans, have been part of this whole conspiracy theory, have been hiding things that, this goes back to, did Kerry Lake really win the governor's race, stuff like that. And so I think he believes that somehow he's going to show that how we're doing it.
Right, but this is my final point for you two, and if you want to jump in on this, Jeremy, to you first. I'm looking at the makeup, the dynamic now. Bill Gates is gone. Jack Sellers is gone. They have been, Tom Galvin is considered a moderate, but Debbie Lesko, Mark Stewart, these are very much Donald Trump supporters. So it feels like they should be on the same political page as Heap. So clearly there's something else.
It does not seem like Heap has worked particularly well with his fellow Republicans. Stewart, I think, is probably a bit more sympathetic to his positions. Lesko, I would have thought coming in as someone he could have made, perhaps an ally of his. I think we've seen in the last couple of days, especially, very much not the case. She just does not seem any happier with Justin Heap than Tom Galvin or Kate Brophy-McGee.
And it becomes a style question. According to the board, they had actually agreed on 98% of all of this. And then all of a sudden he came back, I have 170 changes I'd like to be made here. And I think the board says, okay, we're done with you.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to CorpCom. Let's spend a few minutes on this because a couple of pretty conservative corporation commissioners are going to get primaried by a couple of state lawmakers. Is this another case of Mr. Hoffman deciding that he's going to pick and choose like Yee against Horn?
Well, he's become Trump's surrogate, if you will, here. He says if you're not properly loyal to President Trump, then we want to get rid of the purity of the party, if you will. In this case, a lot of it has to do with Trump saying we like clean coal. We want energy independence, and that is all dependent on coal. Well, what happened is we have the Cholla Power Plant up near Joseph City that APS had been limping along for a long time with the EPA saying, look, we'll let you keep it open, but at some point you're going to need to close it because it cannot be retrofit. And so the corporation commissioners looked at it and said, it'll cost $1.9 billion to get this thing back online. APS said that doesn't make sense. The commissioners said that doesn't make sense. But somehow, to these two challengers, these two Hoffman-picked challengers, they should have been doing that all along. And that shows they're not loyal Trumpers.
And Wayne, your colleague Cameron wrote a lot about this, about sort of the king-making of Mr. Hoffman, right?
Yeah, she kind of did a deep dive because, as you mentioned, Kimberly Yee running for superintendent, he's done this with a lot of positions. And he's been involved in, he leads the Freedom Caucus down at the legislature. So he's been involved in this, especially more at the legislative level for a long time, but he's really taking another step up to trying to win these statewide races with candidates that fit into his political mold, which is how he said is this far right, this MAGA, this kind of in Trump's own image type of thing. And sometimes you have issues they like to point to, like the power plant. Sometimes it seems like they find the issue after they find the people they want to primary, because there's also been some issues where they think the current corporation commission is too deferential to utilities that may want to adopt these different, climate-friendly policies and things like that. But there's very little basis to those concerns, the incumbents would say, but they still point to them as reasons to challenge them.
Sure. Or rate making. There's a change in terms of how allowing utilities to come back and ask for annual formula-based rate hikes. That's another thing that Representative Marshall and Representative Heap talked about. And they launched their campaign. Now, if you talk to Nick Myers and Kevin Thompson, the incumbents being challenged, their view is this isn't about policy at all. This is about Freedom Caucus, about Jake Hoffman specifically wanting people he can control, people who are part of his clique. He can control them in a way that he can't control other folks. They do not view this as, I think they view the policy as kind of in the way that Wayne mentioned, in that they're coming up with the excuses because they need a reason to say this is why we're challenging these incumbents.
It's buzzwords. It's clean, the Green New Deal. it's DEI, it's ESG, you know, environmental stuff. But the fact is, for example, the renewable energy standard was put in going way back to when Chris Mays was on the commission. They voted to repeal it. But to a certain extent, that's sort of a moot point because most of the utilities have come up with their own standards because they recognize that while base load is important, coal is base load, natural gas can be base or peak load, nuclear is base load, they're talking about small nuclear plants, but that they need other sources to go ahead and do it. And a lot of that involves wind and a lot of that involves solar.
Well, can I change up here, Wayne? 'Cause I was going to say a lot of heap. We've been talking 2 heaps already today. Fair to say the Democratic Party's in a heap of trouble at this point? Anyway, let's move to that. What is the current state considering Robert Branscombe, et cetera?
So the Democratic Party elected this new chairman at the beginning of the year. It was a bit of a surprise. He took out the incumbent chairwoman who had the backing of basically every elected statewide Democrat. There was some desire for change in the party because of some fiscal issues, some concerns about self-dealing with party funds, but it has not gone well since that time. Branscombe has run into a lot of opposition from folks in his party who basically just say he's not up to the job, including folks that voted for him initially. Yeah. The party is at risk of running out of money, according to the treasurer. They still have not approved a budget for this year, and now I believe Mary Jo over at The Republic reported that that he's signing checks, even though they don't have that budget, another issue the treasurer has flagged. And so there's a lot of folks who are saying, hey, we want to redo. They've collected signatures, and so Branscombe is supposed to be calling a vote within the next 20 days, I believe, for a vote on the chairman.
So big picture, this matters to those of us who are political junkies. It probably matters to the core folks of the party. If they somehow find a way to raise money, if relationships are healed with Senators Gallego and Kelly, for example, does all of this go away, Jeremy, or could this really hurt in 2026?
I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, it's still far enough out from the election that if everything gets settled and everything calms down, the Democratic, state Democratic or Republican parties, their roles are pretty limited, much more than I think your average person might think. You're distributing money that's coming in from national organizations like the DNC and RNC, or you letting people send out mail using the discount that you get as a political party. Your job is not really to agitate against, your fellow elected officials. As we learned, I think probably in the past more often with the Republican Party out here, John McCain and a chairman that he was often at odds with, and he actually got national folks to just direct money to a county party. So we're not dealing with you anymore. We're going to send this over to Yuma or Pima County, and we're just going to cut you out entirely. Something like that could happen. I think that could probably be at least financially more costly to the Democrats than they would want. And in the end, you just don't want this kind of distraction if you're either party. The Democrats have some high hopes of, retaining statewide offices next year, taking control of the legislature they've been wanting to do for many years. And the more people are focusing on this kind of infighting, theoretically at least, that makes things a little bit more difficult.
Well, that's really the point, is when Kelly Ward headed the Republican Party, folks said, we're not giving her any money. She's crazy. And so they, as you pointed out, gave it to county Republican parties. They found a way around it. If this continues, and if Branscombe becomes somebody who nobody trusts, there's not going to be any money in the party. It's really just going to find its way somewhere else. It may end up through the governor, who's got $4.1 million of her own little sitting there, and she may say, "Oh, I will be the treasurer. I will be the godmother of the party."
Final end this way.
Yeah, and Democrats really need all the headwinds going in their direction to win statewide in Arizona. I mean, there was a lot of talk of Arizona being a purple state after 2022 when they won all those races, like the governor's office. But I mean, voter registration board's out. It's a Republican state, and they benefited from all that discord in the Republican Party. Now that it's in their party, that is not going to help their chances.
Okay, down to our last couple of minutes. Let's talk Governor Hobbs in China, Howie. So she initially vetoed a bill, and now she's come back strong with her own proposal, which is probably not going to actually ever become legislation.
Well, this is funny. The original bill started out in the Senate as saying that if you are a citizen of certain countries that are enemies, China, North Korea, Cuba, Russia, and if you had certain levels of ownership, you couldn't own property here. Went over to the House, and for a variety of reasons, some of which I'm not even sure I fully understand, Representative Culloden said, we're going to make it real simple. The People's Republic of China cannot own property in the United States. Well, I'm not sure the PRC is actually going out and checking with real estate agents and such. So that went to the governor. it was, the governor said, well, it doesn't really solve anything, which is true. It also probably didn't hurt anything because, in fact, that even though the PRC couldn't buy, President Xi could buy property, next door to everyone else. And so it was something, it was a fight she didn't need to pick. Of course, the Republicans came back and said, she doesn't care, the Chinese are coming and they're taking over. And so she proposed what she considers a more comprehensive one, which is, again, performance. That's not going anywhere.
So this override that Senate President Peterson was going to try, any action on that?
No, that's never going to happen. I mean, they haven't seen the legislature override a veto, I think, since around like 1981 or so. I mean, you would have to, I can't see a single Democrat going along with this, and you need, I think, the 2/3 vote. But also Governor Hobbs's plan, that's not going to go anywhere either. I mean, we're possibly in the last week of the legislative session coming up. If they pass a budget, everyone's going to go home after that. There's not a lot of time to vet more bills. They're not going to take the governor's bill up. But if she really wanted to get what she felt was a stronger plan in place here, it probably would have behooved her, especially with an election coming up next year where people are going to say, why did you veto this China bill? Probably would have behooved her to maybe get ahead of the ball and say, hey, we'd like to see some changes to this.
20 seconds?
Yeah, I'll make it really simple. The veto ended up getting a lot of national media coverage, especially on Republican-friendly networks. I think the Republican leadership saw that. They decided to make hay, which forced the governor to respond.
Yeah, so this is not going anywhere.
Oh, no, this is the end of it. It's like so many things. They send things to the governor knowing she's going to veto it so that they can say, look, in 2026, look at what the commies are coming and she's not protecting us.
Okay, gentlemen, great to have you here. Very good to see the Dean of the Capitol Media Corps, Howie. Haven't seen you in a while. Great to see you.
And I'm wearing my budget tie
Yes,
even.
exactly. Jeremy, Wayne, thank you guys for being here. That's all for this edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Steve Goldstein in for Ted Simons. Thanks so much for watching.